Thank you so much. My name is Magnus Christensson. I'm a Swede living in Copenhagen. And I work for a company called Socialsquare. I'm a partner in it as well. And we do basically three things. We work with digital innovation in a way where we try to help our clients identify the digital behavior that's changing their business models today, and identify how their value chains are going to evolve. Based on those insights, we help organizations build business prototypes around how they can make money in the future. And then we help them facilitate product development, the customer development, launch, and evaluation of those services if we find anything interesting to build. We've been doing this since 2005, and we've been doing it for a lot of large organizations in Denmark, as well as state municipalities and so on. But we find that an increasing number of interesting services coming from more digital native products, and I will talk to you today about a product we have been doing for Scandinavia, or Denmark's largest e-commerce site on books, one of Scandinavia's largest as well. A product which I'm really passionate about and which I really love. So basically, based on this case, or from this case, I would like to talk about three things. One is that the internet is changing business as we know it. The second one is that this forces us to design services in completely new ways. And the third thing is, to make things happen, we need to work more like startups. So, as I said, the internet is changing everything, basically. We have these behavior changes with new technologies, where you go from the piece of paper, the consumption part that Chris was also mentioning before, to an integrated system where we can both consume, but as well as create and distribute digital formats. And obviously, when technology prices are going down, it becomes easier for us to produce ourselves. We end up in a situation where more people can do more stuff. And so this marketplace is back on the internet. It becomes more evolved. More people have access to it. It's easier to compete. And these transactions are, to a higher degree, social. So if you take a company like Blockbuster, for example, in Denmark, there was a few of them a couple of years back. There's one left where I live now, and I think in some time they will be gone as well, because this technology does not care about your brand that much. These changes are coming from everywhere, and obviously the value change is changing here. So a company like Netflix has, as a digital-only company, much easier ways to enter the market. And most of these industries used to be physical, but it becomes more and more intangible. And companies that I know that work with physical stuff, medicine or Windows or stuff like that, that would never be digital, I think they will be digital as well very soon. We can see that with NAC+, for example, where the idea came, we went away from the idea of just do it to a service where you combined the shoe with value-adding services or a network around that. I will go back to that a little bit later. So one company who actually knows all about that is Kodak, for example. They were a company who were 133 years old. They invented the film for cameras. They actually had a patent for the first digital camera as well. They didn't realize how the digital markets were changing their business. And they ended up in a situation where they didn't see how the camera moved into the mobile phone, and the photograph basically went online and became a social object which was shared. So in 2004, Flickr was launched. In 2007, the first iPhone was launched. Instagram was launched in 2010. That was sold for $1 million, whatever, billion, I don't know, a lot of money to Facebook in 2012, the same year as Kodak went bankrupt. So in an era which is more visual than anything, I can see all these cameras photographing me, or at least the slides. We are really producing visual content in that era, the most visual company of them all, Kodak, went bankrupt because they didn't realize how the digital markets, the internet, the behavior on the internet is changing business completely. This is really interesting to me, and that's why I work with what I do. So we believe that the future belongs to those who challenge, not to those who lean back and just hope that business as usual continues. And it has never been easier to challenge the markets. I mean, we have Spotify, who both help as well as challenged the music industry. We have Kickstarter, who are facilitating money for projects, cultural projects in the US at least. And we had Airbnb that had been mentioned already before. I think Airbnb is a really interesting project because, or company, because it's basically just putting electricity to a behavior that we have had all the time. So when I went to Berlin 10 years ago, I might have called a friend and asked, can I live on your couch? And when he came to my apartment or to my city, he could stay in my apartment. So this behavior has been built on trust and networks and sociality all the time. And suddenly it can scale, and suddenly we can build something new out of it. Now, my wife is not as used to travel as I am. I'm not saying I'm a globetrotter, but I don't feel intimidated by going to a new city. She's studying in London a couple of days every month, and it's just mind-blowing how this service basically helps her find people. She's living with a Portuguese couple every third week using Airbnb. And the trust that this service is giving her, relating to that travel, is amazing. It's not only about bits, digital interfaces. It's about how you actually design a service that provides the most important thing, in this particular case, trust. That you can go to another city, meet people you never met before, and actually pay for that and feel comfortable doing it. So these services are simple, they are social, and they are, of course, scalable. So we believe, or I believe, that we had a focus before, which was on communication and branding. So we had very, very little focus on the products and service, and then we used a lot of time spending and a lot of resources and money spending on building a brand or communicating the benefits. But we think that today, and also even more so going forward, we should spend our money and our focus on products and services. I think this is where the real differentiator will lie, and I think this is why people say we don't have time to spend our time on you know, there's so many products and services out there. So if you spend time on the right ones, you stay with them, you keep with them. We don't think it's enough to design and implement user-friendly touchpoints or creative service blueprints or interview or observe users if you can't also understand the internet. Changes in value chains and these challenges that I mentioned before. You also have to understand communities and participation and social interaction. And you have to be agile when you build your business and you prototype the services. So I've been spoken a bit about the internet part, so let's talk about understanding communities or actually building for social interactions. And later on I will go into the more agile part of the business development. I think it's really important not only to use co-creation as a way to actually design your services, but to acknowledge that services are valuable to people because other people are using them. So co-creation is not only something you do until you launch, but it's something that the design has to take into account after you have launched and gone into the market. Not only because you have to modify and change the service as you go along, it's in a permanent beta, so to speak, but because these services grow because we use them. Wouldn't make sense to be the only one on Facebook. Wouldn't make sense to be the only one on Airbnb. They're designed to acknowledge that there's more people there. And one way of doing that we're really fond of is using a lot of different tools. One of them is this, which is a model from Butterfield and Webb, which has been modified by my business partner, Thomas Madsen Mygdal, using a Finnish sociologist and entrepreneur called Yuri Engström, his idea about the social object. So the social object is basically what we integrate or interact around. So on Flickr in the old days and Instagram today would be the photograph. That's what connects us. So we are not connecting one-to-one as persons, we are connecting through a service or a social object in this sense. And around this, you can use these building blocks to basically design your platform, your network service, or your product. So if we take a common service we all know, like Facebook, we need to ask ourselves, how do we design for identity? How do we design for the ability to show who you are and what you like to do? How do you show relations to other people? Are they synchronous, like on Facebook, or asynchronous, like on Twitter? How do you show presence? Is this service live? Do you see other people using it? How do you design for or enable organization? Can I create groups of interest by myself, or is this predefined by the service and so on? How do we design for conversations in this sense? How do we design for sharing? What can be shared? How do we integrate to other services? And how do I get the flow, the idea of this being a living thing, being updated and so on all the time? So based on this idea, we can start addressing things like trust, like culture. What kind of culture do we want on this service? What kind of roles should people have? What kind of formats should be used? What kind of actions can be taken? And so on and so forth. So in that sense, I believe that digital products and services are co-creation in themselves. They are being built as they are being used, and I think this poses a really interesting opportunity as well as a challenge for us as practitioners building services, both in a physical as well as a digital sense. So the other part I wanted to talk about is, if this was what you should build, this is more related to how you should build it. So we want to build stuff that actually is being used, right? And we have already had a very brief introduction by Chris related to the lean startup, so I shouldn't spend too much time on it. But I think the main point with the lean startup approach is that it is an idea looking for a validated business model. It's really important to understand that it's a way of doing things, but it's more important to use this technology or methodology if you are trying to solve an unknown problem and building something that hasn't been built before. It's easier to be operational wise if you know exactly what to do. If you want a banner, you know where to go. If you're trying to solve a problem and build something that hasn't been done before, you need to minimize the risk, build as little as possible wrong and work as fast as you can. So the idea here is basically to use hypotheses, to build prototypes and minimal viable products, to develop customer relationship and get feedback using interviews or systematic gather feedback, and to learn on what works and what doesn't work, to evaluate, to analyze, and to adapt your business model. And you're looking for a validated business model. This is what you go for, and this is what you should use this model for, as far as I'm concerned. So design in this sense shouldn't be looking for ideas, it should be looking for customers. It's really important to understand we're building stuff that we should make money on in this sense, and therefore I think that this approach could help us, and I think that a service design approach could help us as well. So I want to talk to you about a case that we've been doing, as I mentioned before, with a company called Saxo.com. Saxo.com is Denmark's largest e-commerce site for physical books, so they are an e-commerce site, right? They have a revenue approximately 200 million Danish kroner, and they have approximately 10 million visitors a year on their site, and it's growing. So this is not a startup. This is an operational, lean, mean machine, and they're really, really worried. I don't know, is there any people from the publishing industry here today? Is anyone from a... They're out trying to make some money. I think the issue the publishing industry is in is digitalization, right? So this organization makes a lot of money and have a really, really interesting as-is business. But the problem for them is obviously what should I make money on in the future? If they continue doing this thing, selling physical books to people, being really, really good at distributing these books, they won't have a business in 3 years. They're going to be like Kodak. So who are the future winners? How does the value chain look? How is the future reader behaving? Who is the author of the future? A lot of these questions popped up to them when they started working, popped up in their head, and then they started working with us. I think one of the things here is, what is the next business we should go into? So we try to help them making a market space, trying to navigate this field. We made interviews with authors. How are their business changing? Are they seeing themselves as business people or as creatives? How are readers' behavior changing? What kind of experts are making money on content today? We analyzed the market, did a lot of workshop, and we also looked at the current platforms. We found out of a lot of things, but two things I would like to mention is major things. For example, the traditional value chain is obviously changing. So used to be that the writer had a book, went to the publisher said, okay, let me take care of all your copyrights, let me take the risk, and I have a printing house in the basement, and then we hand it out to a store, and the store sells the book to a reader. And digitalization has basically changed this, obviously, so the book now goes directly to a store in a digital format, because the writer still doesn't have the ability, not all writers have the ability to actually sell their books themselves. And then you have this direct relationship between the writer and the reader, and this changes the equation totally. Paul Coelho, I think, has more than 3 million followers on Twitter, and I think it's the main point that he can actually sell his own books directly to his readers. Other thing that we found out is that the idea of the writer and the idea of the book is changing. So more people create content. You have consultants like me writing a white paper, you have companies, you have bloggers, you have scientists, you have cultural institutions who produce a lot of content. And the formats is changing as well. The book, magazine, reports, blogs, thesis, there's a lot of things that can be sold in a digital format. And this is changing the market for this. So you have all the disruptions that you can imagine at the same time. Knowing this, the question is, which market position should you take? And how would you make money in the future? And how would this platform look? And how does that affect our organization? So what services should we offer? We did a lot of analysis on where the competitors are strong, the value chain in the market. We looked at the market position. And we looked also on the form and functions of these services. And one of the things that we thought from the beginning was that this is technical stuff. If you're a good writer and you're writing in Word or in Pages, you want to be able to get help to convert this into formats that can be used and sold and so on. So you have this idea of you have to know how to convert into an EPUB, for example, and put pictures in it and stuff like that. So our ambition was to help the writer from A to Z. So this file conversion was the hypothesis. It was really important. We tested this. We used a service that was focused on file conversion, and it actually didn't work at all. People didn't like it. It wasn't their problem. So the hypotheses were rejected, and we went in a completely different direction, looking more into making publishing easy and not the technical side of it, and especially helping them with effective marketing. So now the test was to look at access to the market and insights into the market instead. I've been writing, or my company has been writing a book years back, and we never sell any. But when we sell 2 or 3, we have to wait 16 months to get a piece of paper telling us how much we sold the year before, so we can send an invoice to the publishing house. 16 months. I mean, we're not a big seller, so if I were, perhaps 6 months or perhaps 3 months, I don't know. But insight into the market is really, really important for these people. You know, it means a lot to know what kind of transactions are going on and so on. So this was more important, and we used that to among other things, design something that looks completely different. So we wanted to allow for easy and free access to a marketplace. We wanted to make these previously hidden data more available and transparent. We wanted to allow different stakeholders to connect and lower the cost of entering into the market. We wanted also to enable people to meet each other, to create communities where authors could meet each other and so on. And we wanted to enable an intention market, and I'll go back to that in a second. We used these service blueprint-like prototypes of the business. So this is a way for us to show all the different phases through the service and design each phase in different ways. So the idea in the first phase is basically to discuss whether I want to be an author and what does it take to be an author and be able to provide services related to that, but also network and being able to meet different authors. And then you have a prediction phase, you have a post-production phase where you are going into a marketplace where you can actually buy services from other authors like editors, design, and so on. Things that the publishing houses used to provide, and that they still will provide in the future. So this is not provided by the client, Saxo.com, but they enable people to actually sell this to each other on this marketplace. And then going into a sales and marketing phase where you can buy marketing packages and so on. And then you have the whole social consumption side. If you have the digital means to look at where people read, stop reading, what chapters are being read most, and so on and so forth. This is information which is relevant for an author. So there's a lot of stuff there that's interesting. Once we've validated this product on a piece of paper or the prototypes in different ways, you have a more insightful decision to be made. Do you want to go and do this, or do you want to cancel the project? I think this is where service blueprints are really a good way to test prototypes. I mean, we had lots of different iterations on this, obviously, and it also was a helpful artifact when we met different people to show them what we wanted to build. So once they said yes, the question is, how do we deliver the most value with the least effort as quickly as possible? So we need to be able to go into the market with a product which we can modify and which we can test as we go along. So what we did was we established kind of a startup inside this organization. We took people from the core development team. We put them in a room. We hoisted the pirate flag, and we said, we're going to change this business. We're going to change this organization completely. We're going to democratize publishing in Denmark and make everybody make it accessible for everybody to actually publish and earn money on their stuff. So we used what we call a launch framework to have a holistic view on product development, not only looking at technology or design, but also on law and pricing and so on. We worked a lot with customer development workshops. We had this build, test, learn iteration to build this business, weekly sprints, daily check-ins, all of that stuff that makes things actually happen. I think this is really important for an organization which is very, very good at operations. Being an entrepreneur is very difficult. So you need to put it into perspective. You have to systematically work with this. So we did a lot of things to define a minimal product, test hypothesis, design for sociality, and so on. Core features, flow grids. We established partnerships for the marketplace I was mentioning. We actually hired entrepreneurs as well as a team at the premises, so they now have a team. We defined different launch criteria. How many people should be on the platform when we launched? How many people should be at the launch? We hired the Royal Library in Copenhagen and just get as many people in as possible, trying to be Steve Jobs of the publishing industry. And it all worked out fine. Now, this is a minimal viable product still. We are developing this, but the writer have complete control. He keeps all his rights. He gets 70% as compared to 10 or 15 today. He decides his price himself. He has the ability to select proofreaders, editors, translators, illustrators. He gets the business intelligence that he didn't get before, which also makes it interesting for publishers to actually be in here because they don't know what the physical bookstores sell. So that information is relevant for them as well. And then he has the ability to sell to 10 million visitors. It's launched on time, everything is happy. And it's an interesting continuation of the product. But to conclude, I would like to say that this market is, the internet's basically changing all of this. This once was business to consumer, is now also consumer to consumer and consumer to business. So this more social, interactive marketplace is really interesting for us as designers to look upon. And I think it's going to change business models. I think that's a perspective we need to have when we design services, because they're going to support completely new business models. The other thing is that the service design itself has to take into account, as I said, servicing being used and value being created when people are actually using the services. So this co-creation of value, so to speak, is really important to think about when you design services. And then we need to remember that large organizations can move quickly, but they need ways to doing so. So Steve Blank said, one of the guys behind lean startup movements, said that startups are not small version of large organizations. Well, I think the other way around, large organizations can be very inspired by startups and getting things done. So I think there's ways to see how you can create value, minimizing risk, getting to market quickly, and build services that actually can pay off by using some of these tools. That's at least my experience. Thank you so much.
So before we all rush into the much-needed coffee break, we have time for one question for Magnus. And I exclude Reto, of course.
Then there's no one.
No. I will now use some human-human interaction. The most underestimated power of interaction design by looking somebody into the eyes. I want a question from this part of the room. I don't know why. There it is. Always works.
Thanks. Very interesting talk, Magnus. My question is around one of the first slides there, where you had the radius of the marketing communication circle shrinking. I wonder, in the world where everything gets much more complex and the abilities to market and communicate on tons of different channels, outposts, etc., get so overwhelmingly big. So what's your view on how can you then shrink the effort on marketing communications when everything seems to explode in ability?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think, first of all, those percentages, it's more design than truth. So, but the tendency is what I see. And I say that because I think that more and more of these products built in communication into the services. So you're out to communicate. So the way you can actually build communication into a service is by acknowledging that it will be used by a lot of different people. And when it's used, you actually communicate around it. So that's one answer to it. Another answer is that it's what I hope we will see in the future, in the sense that we should spend less money talking about how great the product is and spend more money on actually making great products. Because in that sense, it's going to be competitive. It's going to be the ones that are being used. So that's another perspective on it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Magnus.